Hi, everybody. You're all very welcome to this evening's talk brought to you by Inwardbound. My name is Michael Ledden. I'm an accredited psychotherapist, and tonight's talk is on Harmonizing Inner Landscapes, a practical guide to psychedelic integration. So yeah, just to immediately dive right in, before I introduce myself and the topic, I'm just going to tell you guys just a little bit briefly about Inwardbound. So yeah, Inwardbound psilocybin retreats has been providing this work for the world since 2018. Currently, we are providing psychedelic retreats in the Netherlands and Costa Rica, and folks who are interested can look into having 4-day or 5-day group retreats and private retreats. Inwardbound was founded by our co-founders, Rob Coffey and Dr. Dara Stewart. I understand Rob and the guys are on the call tonight, so hi, thanks for joining. And I suppose my story with Inwardbound began about 3 years ago when I joined the team, and I've got a particular interest in this area of integration. So just a little bit of background on myself. I have a BA in religion and theology and something in international peace studies and a master's in integrative psychotherapy. And I suppose all my life I'd been kind of fascinated with self-improvement. So personal therapy and all that process during training was really enjoyable for me. And probably about 6 years ago, I began to be drawn towards psychedelics. Like for many of us, sort of can be precipitated by a little bit of a crisis or something we go through. For me, it was a bit of a breakup that brought me further towards psychedelics. But I'd already been a little bit on the path, having discovered cacao, shamanism, holotropic breathwork. And I suppose, my first big ceremonial experience with psychedelics was around 5 years ago, which was really, for me, the start of my integration journey. And I suppose, that for me, that was 4 ceremonies of ayahuasca and 1 ceremony of San Pedro. So I kind of call that my own not so straightforward integration journey, which gave me such an interest in this area. So while on the one hand, I'd kind of say that there was so many positives and benefits. So for me, it was kind of a sense of meeting my soul, a sense of the divine. And before this, I would have said I was coming from a fairly agnostic or even atheistic kind of worldview. So that was a huge change for me. It was brought, an immense feeling of wellness at all as well, that everything is as it should be, and just sort of a watershed moment really for me. I'd say life kind of was never the same after that. There was immense amount of healing, release, purging of energy, emotions, things I didn't even know I was holding on to. Probably as well, I'd say probably the deepest experience of my life, and just this sort of sense of awe and wonder at everything. This sort of peak experience, which was profoundly beneficial. So what's wrong with that? But on the other hand, coming out of it without really much of an idea around psychedelic integration, I also kind of fell into, a deep kind of sense of terror of losing friendships and the changes, any kind of probably a bit of anxiety there, uncertainty. Am I going to still be the same person? Is everything going to change for me? Are people going to accept me, reject me? If my friend came to me and said all this, 6 months ago, would I be thinking, right, Jesus, they've actually lost it? Huge sense of ontological shock. So even though I'd studied religions and I trained as a therapist, this was beyond anything that any human can really comprehend. Many of these mystical experiences are beyond words. So I certainly felt that, a huge sense of ontological shock. And I think at that point, if the facilitator had told me he was a guru or Jesus Christ, I don't know if I would have believed him, because I was just so opened up to a different worldview, different possibilities. I fell into some of the major traps, making sort of a bad major life decision soon after it. Something that I later came to realize was not the right move. And all kind of brought on with this, I need to do something with this now, or this kind of false sense of urgency and confidence that seemed to come from it. I think I'd probably, even though I was terrified, maybe fell a little bit into oversharing it. I certainly would say shadow parts of myself rising when there's that much light kind of coming in. There's going to be a shadow side coming out, and with no therapy, with no integration, no way of knowing what maybe no framework to guide me in what I needed to do. About 5 months, 6 months later, I had kind of a feeling of I've lost it, feeling a little bit like a failure, questioning was it even real, and kind of probably a different person, but also going through this, certainly not taking the most out of it. But then I'm grateful in my case that I was able to kind of find a path again. So not long after kind of hitting that point of like feeling, oh my God, I've lost it, I decided to return to psychedelics, maybe with a more serious intention and integration focus. This time around, I had support, I had therapy. I went out of my way to find more community, a lot of reading around it, daily practices. One thing that really helped me was going and wanting to turn this into good. And so what I did was I went and started volunteering with Psychedelic UK, who provide welfare supports at music festivals, and sort of began to develop my own passion, through my struggle with it, that I would love to help others in this process of how they can successfully and healthily integrate psychedelic experiences if they're called to do so. So I undertook a number of trainings in psychedelic therapy, shamanic training, shamanic counseling, and cacao facilitation training. So constantly trying to upscale and understand the holistic world mixed with the psychotherapeutic. So today, my work very much is one, in the private sector. I support individuals through my business, Psychedelic Integration Ireland, providing preparation advice, integration, shamanic counseling, shamanic energy therapy technique for people in Ireland and beyond, those modalities to help people revisit, understand, integrate, and be well and be safe after their journey or prepare for it. I'm also the co-founder and chairperson of Psychcare Ireland Welfare and Harm Reduction. We brought the idea of a psychedelic welfare for music festivals for people having difficult, challenging experiences. We brought that idea over to Ireland now. We have 140 volunteers, and we're a non-profit that supports people in those spaces. And of course, the main reason I'm here today is that I'm a psychotherapist and retreat facilitator with Inwardbound psilocybin retreats. And at the moment, I'd be probably the main therapist providing preparation and integration sessions to all of our Netherlands clients. So from quite a journey. That's why I suppose for me, integration is such a key aspect of this, that we think about, oh, it's happily ever after once we have a psychedelic experience. But it may not go that way. You may, of course, be presented with challenges and opportunities after working with psychedelics. So just a little bit of the content of what I intend to cover in this talk. First, we're going to just cover a little bit about just generally what is integration. It's such a buzzword that's thrown around that we hear about, oh, your integration phase. So I want to just maybe give a definition of what that is. I want to look at sort of why do we need integration, and maybe some of the cultural differences between maybe their more shamanic seat of use, and for us more in the West, trying to integrate it into maybe our more sort of rational, logical worldview, and how that can be a hindrance to us in some ways actually with integration. I want to look at the risks of non-integration quickly, well, we need it for this, but also what happens if we kind of skip the integration phase and just keep going back again and again for the experience. I'm going to cover a little bit on the sort of the integration basics, I call them, or sort of in the short term, how you can just after help set yourself up for an integration, even before you come to work with psychedelics, and just after. And then we're going to look at a kind of a holistic framework for integration, a more long-term view that you can take if working with yourself, if assessing where you're at, making sure that your integration is still working through you. And finally, we're just going to get into some resources. some resources I can share, things for you guys to take away. So yeah, we can dive straight in. So a really nice definition of integration that kind of draws in all the different components of it in my mind would be from Battier et al. Just 2 years ago. So that integration is a process in which a person revisits and actively engages in making sense of, working through, translating, and processing the content of their psychedelic experience. So there is a kind of a cognitive piece of trying to figure it out, and you've had this experience that maybe doesn't fit in too many cognitive boxes, but coming away and saying, okay, well, what has that meant for me? How do I translate it? How do I keep processing the images, the content? And then through intentional effort and supportive practices, the process kind of further allows one to gradually capture and incorporate the emergent lessons and insights into their lives, thus moving towards greater balance and wholeness, both internally, mind, body, and spirit, and externally in terms of lifestyle, social relations, and the natural world. So yeah, it incorporates quite a lot in our long-term view of integration. I'll be giving you guys some pointers on each part of that and trying to give you a framework. As well, just to say, this talk is going to focus more on maximizing the benefits of integration rather than the integration process and the sort of reintegration or piecing back together, say after a psychedelic journey where things have gone wrong. So that could be bad facilitation, wrong setting, and psychosis, things like that. That would nearly need a separate talk on its own. But in the questions later, we may touch into some things like that. Happy to answer. So, but that's a very kind of wordy and sort of big kind of explanation. But another way that it can be quite nice to explore what psychedelic integration means is through metaphors. And a metaphor, can capture maybe an angle or a piece, a sort of a side or a view of something, to sort of, imperfectly try to explain visually and creatively the whole story. So the first metaphor that I quite like is that we can consider psychedelic integration a bit like the process of developing a film. Developing film from a camera. So we sort of have this experience, it folds in front of us. We have the experience stored within us. We take a picture, but very much like a film camera, we need to go through a little bit of a process of developing and framing that sort of picturing that, what we have seen, and really working with the image in detail, looking back at it. So then maybe even framing and hanging the picture in our house, figuring out where does it fit in our lives. So that's at one level. At another level, we could think about it a bit like, recovering a piece of the puzzle, a piece of the jigsaw. And, like any new piece that we've picked up along the way, any new experience, we're trying to sort of fit that in. It might be a lost part of ourself that's been returned. It might have been, removing internal barriers that we have, for finding a new worldview, finding a new way of thinking or looking at ourselves, a new spirituality maybe, and sort of placing that into the jigsaw of our life. So putting that newer emergent piece into the puzzle that we are. Another metaphor very much that we use a lot in Inwardbound is around this. So it's amazing when you put something into ChatGPT, what it'll produce for you. So this image, it's designed to kind of capture what we'd say is in the process of having the journey. You can think about your journey deep within yourself with psychedelic therapy is you're on the stormy seas and you sinking down or diving down into the dark, murky water, going all the way to the bottom, maybe encountering some threshold kind of challenges, having to go through some difficult parts, sinking deeper and deeper down into the murk, and at the bottom finding a sort of a lost treasure, an insight, a vision, some kind of wisdom. And you're kind of, during the journey, you're making that process of getting that from the bottom of the ocean, and then as you navigate through it, getting it back up onto the beach, making it back to the boat or back onto the beach. And normally after a psychedelic journey, people, it's very normal to be very tired, so you kind of nearly flop onto the beach, and the treasure just lies beside you, and you rest. Now the next day, there is the process then of maybe, okay, you've recovered physically, you've made sure that you're safe and well fed and rested and grounded. Then it's like, okay, this treasure's been at the bottom of the ocean for a long time. Maybe it needs a little bit of a polishing and a bit of a cleaning up. So you sort of start to look at it and sort of go, well, this is what I've got. This is what I've actually captured. This is what it's worth. This is how it fits. And then indeed, you're making the plan then, okay, now how do I get back from the beach? How do I bring this home? So yeah, just a few metaphors and ways to explain it. And I suppose, yeah, the kind of thing is like, how prevalent is integration? And moving on to sort of why do we think we need it? So Inwardbound talk about this, other institutions talk about this. Most, if not all, of the major institutes in this area, such as MAPS, the Berkeley Foundation, Heffler Research, they've long spoken about having a kind of a model or a plan developed, treatment protocols that can assist people with preparation, psychological support, psychotherapy, and integration. That it is psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. It's not just take a psychedelic and then all your problems are solved. There is a process, and that's broadly recognized. And this kind of comes in the Western model from pioneers such as Stan Grof, Mesner, Richards there. They talk about the kind of the process of maximizing the benefits for folks and making sure that they're safe. But long before Western psychologists or psychiatrists or psychotherapists began to get their hands on this, the psychedelics have a long history of use in indigenous cultures all over the world, stretching back thousands of years. So we kind of say, however, we're not the first ones to do this. So again, they've been used for a long time. And in these traditions, we could kind of say that the indigenous healing practices, which may use psychedelics in different ways for such as physical healing, divination, sorcery, that broadly speaking, there are certain assumptions in these contexts that may differ from our own. So for instance, they look at the concepts of holism, interconnectedness, and harmony, balance. Even saying that, illness may be someone suffering from a lack of this harmony and balance. And, their primary approaches would involve, communal, group, family networks, a mix of maybe spiritual beliefs and tradition, and indeed the inclusion of shamans. And shaman means, they who see in the dark, or she who sees in the dark. So in really invoking that kind of tradition and spiritual belief. So in those contexts, the mind, body, spirit, community, nature piece seems to be all interrelated and unified with daily life. So spirituality and medicine are not seen as separate. Again, imbalance or separation between these elements is maybe seen as a source of illness. But so then in regards to integration, as we're trying to understand this process of engaging with it, some say that indigenous peoples or cultures, they don't have the same need for like a formal integration program, because the psychedelics are sort of ever present as part of the community and the culture and their holistic worldview, because it's already integrated in. They don't need to make sense of, oh my God, this spiritual insight, because it's actually already part of the culture. So, but in contrast, ourselves, maybe coming from a more Western context, we may not have the adequate cultural references, the ability to comprehend the complex, abstract, symbolic content that also often emerges with psychedelics. So necessitating therapists and guides or coaches who maybe are familiar with some of these things, so that they may provide therapeutic support throughout the process, particularly in that integration phase and preparation. So therefore, it's in our benefit to understand that we may require some support after this. Like me going to my retreat, I didn't even think, what am I going to be like after this? How is this going to affect me? But lo and behold, yeah, I was suffering maybe from a lot of that lack of context and quite open and exposed, really. So, and this piece then is also, aside from just not getting the maximum benefits out of it or feeling a bit lost, there are certain risks for non-integration or overdoing it. So I really like this one here on the right that I've seen online, the guy kind of coming out of the cave. Should I sit with more medicine? And the shadow or the piece behind is going, bro, effing integrate me. That this kind of constant returning back to it may not be beneficial, because you were stirring stuff up, but then we're not actually taking the time to properly sit with it and work with it. So yeah, the first one is maybe not taking full advantage of the experience, taking it and putting it in a box and moving on, going back to our old habits, our old way of doing things, and not actually giving it the chance to ripple out into behavioral or social or other kinds of change habits. And there certainly can be a risk of ego inflation. Many report this kind of encountering the divine or spirituality, and with repeated exposure to that, a bit like the kiddie looking at the line in the mirror, we can have this ego inflation, or think about, oh, I'm special in some way. And that's the thing, we're all special. We are all special, but too much psychedelic exposure can certainly cause that ego piece. Or someone says, I had one experience with this, now I want to be a facilitator or a shaman. You really need to slow down to understand that and to process that in terms of what's going on in your psyche. Could be glossing over, some difficult stuff comes up and it's telling us, oh, we need more work in this place. We need to maybe work on maybe that relationship, or maybe work on that piece. But then, we have another experience soon after and it tells us something else. We can kind of gloss over. Can be also the spiritual bypassing. That's saying, oh, well, everything's love and light. And, oh, I didn't like that psychedelic experience that tried to bring me into something bad. So I'm just going to keep chasing that kind of high, which is exactly attachment to the experience. And I would say, eventual, disembodiment and disempowerment. So disembodying, losing the feelings, it literally draining, and then a kind of a disempowerment or confusion that may arise. So these are some of the risks. And to move into, the kind of the piece around, well, how do you set yourself up for a good integration? I would kind of very strongly say, good integration really, it starts before the journey, before you take the psilocybin or the psychedelic, to really try and capture that. So some things that help before would be the classic, the preparation, planning for it, making sure that you're in a good place, that you have the space and the time, that the setting substance. Are you mentally prepared? Do you have contingencies? Do you have breathing techniques and things that you're ready? The setting, are you in a nice, safe space, first of all? That's why sometimes we see a lot in the festival work, people planning on, oh yeah, I'm at a music festival, I haven't slept in 2 days, and now today is the day I'm going to try and have a big breakthrough and take a load of acid or something. Maybe that's not the best setting. Maybe you're not in the best mindset. How are you going to integrate that if you're in that space? So you need to maybe set it aside as something sacred. The substance, do you know the dose? Do you know what you're taking? Have you tested it? I think Dara, our co-founders, talks quite a lot about these concepts, so I won't labor on too long on them. And intention. With Inwardbound, we'd very much say intention is a powerful piece to help sort of prepare the subconscious to go in a certain direction. So we'd say, journal your intention, write it out, be prepared to say it. Sometimes in your journey, maybe come back to it, but also at the same time, don't cling too tightly to your intention. Let the journey take you where you need to go, but to have a kind of an idea. Okay, I'm doing this to work on something I'm willing to be taught lessons about. Not that it's kind of just let's just see what it brings. That can work too. But if you do have an intention, something that you would like to change, that kind of focus can often increase the chances of a successful integration. Because what are you trying to integrate then? What are you measuring it against? So I'd say just give yourself space afterwards. Don't be rushing back to work straight away after. Don't be, certainly going straight into work emails. Give yourself some time. We'll talk about what your needs might be just immediately afterwards in a moment. Having an integration plan in place. Hopefully I'll be giving you some of that later in the talk. Work and other obligations set aside. So just those little bits of practical prep they're setting you up with the best foundation to get something from the experience and move then into a long and helpful integration. So kind of post-journey, that sort of short-term integration that I spoke about. First, bearing in mind that right after the experience, it's very normal to feel a multitude of different ways. Again, a bit like myself, feeling very positive, but also a little bit apprehensive. You could feel drained or energized, emotionally raw and sensitive, perhaps vulnerable and open, maybe more open to people's energies, more open to feeling upset. Your emotions might still be rolling. You may feel disorientated, perhaps in the immediate aftermath. You may feel confused, or you may feel like you actually have clarity for the first time. It may feel like you've had a bit of a reality check. You might feel a little bruised after it, which may be good or bad. You may feel in either way. You may also feel a deep sense of peace and tranquility, feeling really, really wonderful from the experience. And so to bear all that in mind, and remember, you're not going to be doing the immediate heavy work of like an integration plan maybe directly afterwards, but there's some basics that you would probably want to just be ready to meet for yourself. We might say, obviously, a big one is just rest. Lying there, even though it's like, I've spent the whole day lying down, you could still be absolutely exhausted from a psychedelic journey, emotionally, mentally, physically exhausted. So rest. Hydration and nutrition. Many people fast going into psychedelics or try not to drink too much water so that they're not up and down to the bathroom. So you need to get your blood sugar back up. You need hydration, a little bit of time for yourself, time to journal, time to spend some alone time if necessary, or just quiet time. So you're not going straight out to the party, after a day of doing this, or straight back to the city. Nature can be a wonderful time to connect back in with nature, even just to get out for a quick walk. But any kind of nature exposure that you can do is wonderful. Having some support that may be necessary. So while you may also want to be left alone, you may also like to have a little bit of support there. So just even to give yourself that option. Of course, if you're doing it on a retreat, all these things are covered for you, that you have a beautiful place, time in nature, time to yourself, support if you need it, hydration and nutrition. You've got that whole setting, safety, substance piece covered, which is very, very nice to help you fully relax and surrender. So just then our kind of general integration advice, we'd say coming out of it, still kind of in the short term here, you're talking maybe in the 48 to 72 hours after the experience. We'd say, don't feel the need to go and tell everyone straight away about it. I'm quite fond of the expression, the difference between the mystic and the psychotic is that the mystic knows who not to talk to. So sharing it or oversharing it with people who maybe aren't familiar with these kind of experiences or aren't in a place to hear you could actually be quite disempowering. So just being mindful, not to tell everybody, ask people if they're in a position to listen to you or to share it with, or, if you're in a group that's done it together, perfect. Everyone's open, everyone's listening, but just don't give too much of the power of it away. Do keep it to yourself for a while and then selectively choose who you wish to include. Don't make big life decisions straight away. If you want to run away to an ashram, if you want to sell your house or break up with your spouse, give all your possessions away, I'd say, we say give yourself 4 to 6 weeks before you just fully decide on any big life decisions. Yes, consider it. But if it's still a good idea in 4 to 6 weeks, maybe you've got something more to go on there. That just after a psychedelic experience, we can be quite prone to a kind of a high and afterglow. So it's just to be gentle with that and not to be careful not to do something you might later wish you hadn't done. Certainly straight after, and you'll find this a lot in the retreats, something like body work, massage, dance, movement, nervous system regulation work, shaking, just to really make sure that whatever charge or emotions have come up, that it's fully processed and out of your system, that you've worked fully through it. I'd always recommend draw art or make a mandala. So, a picture can paint 1,000 words or say 1,000 words. So finding a way, even if you wouldn't normally do it, or things like sandbox or clay or some way of expressing what you went through, that maybe words can help, but it's also this way, you are using more of that kind of right side of the brain, which is then the more creativity. So actually behind me here, I have some of my own mandalas, which are hanging in my home just to see them every day. The mandala, again, can just be, even if you're like me, wouldn't rate yourself very much as an artist, it's still just a different kind of expression. Always recommend, don't drink drugs, don't take drugs or drink alcohol immediately afterwards. You're still maybe processing, things are moving through. So in that period afterwards, it's often good just to allow your body to let your body keep processing, keep letting things out, keep drawing, keep moving, keep shaking, just to really ensure that what you've worked with or resurfaced is fully processed. And in Inwardbound, we always talk about our meds. So take your meds, that's your meditation, exercise, diet, and sleep are really important in life in general, but particularly in the weeks after a psychedelic journey, because you're in a neuroplastic window, so it can really help to just keep your momentum, keep your process going. So I think that's in a way sort of coming through to our short-term kind of how to mind yourself and integration-wise, and now sort of taking a view maybe more on the long term. So this is kind of a model by Mark Axala, who wrote a great book last year called Psychedelic Integration, where he says, we're looking towards a number of different integration spectrums. So these areas that you can consider focusing on if trying to chart or map out, your own integration, they're all interlinked. So a bit like, any kind of holistic system, when we're taking into account a positive change in one area is going to affect all the other areas. Likewise, something being out of kilter is probably pointing to there are other areas, there are things going on or problems in those areas. So we'll just go through what some of the areas in this model are, and then we can talk about how psychedelics may lead to a change in some of them and how you can promote that change, because promoting change in one area is promoting change in all of the areas. And if you're conscious to promote a little bit of change or have some action forward in all of the areas, the compounding impact on your well-being and on bringing your integration journey forward is astounding. So it's, going through them, as I'll probably say on this, the first level is the cognitive. Now, the cognitive in a lot of our models is, theorized to be the main impact. The talk about the neuroplasticity. They talk about sort of changing the default mode network. They talk about entropy, and belief change and everything like that. So that's a piece that often gets an awful lot of the conversation. But I would say, it is one of 7 pieces that we will work with. But nonetheless, we will go through at a cognitive level how you can work with your psychedelic experience to try to maximize the benefits. But of course, intrinsically linked with the mind is, of course, the body. So an area we will cover is on the physical side. Psychedelic journeys are often very physical. There's a lot of releasing, your nervous system's involved. We say at Inwardbound, and other people do too, that the body is a map of the unconscious. So what we're working with there has a big impact on, the cognitive and the other areas. The third area, which you might have guessed, is going to be the emotional area. Psychedelic therapy has a big application for the releasing of trapped emotions, of improving our relationship with our emotions and understanding where they come from. So if your journey has had a bit of an emotional content to it, and most people's do, continuing to work at that level is going to help the other areas and help you to move forward, like inwardly and outwardly. There's the other dimension, which we might call the spiritual. I know spiritual can be a little bit of a triggering word for some people, but and when I say it in this context, it's basically whatever that means to you. That might just be the spiritual connection that you feel with your dog, with the people you love. It might be the connection you feel with nature. It might have been some mystical piece that came in your work. So it's non-prescriptive, it's non-denominational, not promoting any theory or practice or belief in any tradition. But it is an important realm and avenue that comes into it for a lot of people, a personal meaning or a personal kind of level of spirituality. The next level we look at is the behavioral, so the outward, what we do, what we don't do, what we avoid, and how changes in those other 4 areas can, of course, impact that, and likewise, how behavior can re-cement going back to these positive changes. Nearly there, the next level is the social level, how we are in community, how we are with others, our boundaries and everything like that. And then the temporal, which is kind of how we relate all this to the sort of model of time that we have, that as an integration journey flows, do we expect it to be linear or is it a little bit more nuanced? So we'll go into that one last because it kind of underpins everything else. And just to say, with this, no one's integration journey is the same. So no one's configuration of things that they need to do in any of these areas or that they could benefit from doing is the same. So we will work through each of them. And I hope that in each area, there's something that speaks to everyone who's watching, whether you're preparing to do psychedelics and thinking about integrating or whether you're trying to get your own integration on track. So moving in through the different areas. So the first, the mind, the often lauded mind, So again, we said this is the area it's given the most credence, but it's also linked to all the others. So, and I would say that a good cognitive integration supports all the other layers, and of course, vice versa. But many of us, we will have made changes in how we think. We will maybe be less prone towards negativity. It's a holistic framework, but some of the things that we can do in this area or things to bear in mind would be, first, it is maybe as part of any integration journey, trying to engage a little bit with the content, developing deeper meanings and understandings of what was going on. Again, your mandala can help with that, taking a step back to just sort of reflect on, okay, so what was going on there? Sometimes a narrative account can help to write it out. Many people find that helpful. Maybe we wouldn't say you don't have to do that the same day as, but unless you feel pressed to. But yeah, the narrative biographical kind of insight might have come. You might have realized new things, those new pieces of information, or a more deeper sense of empathy or clarity, maybe for people who have been in your life or for yourself. Those cognitive shifts can often, change our worldview, change our perspective going forward. Another piece that can help with the cognitive, with the making meaning, is maybe collages. Mandala I already touched on, art, sandbox, dream work, re-engaging with the topic as if it were a dream. Something like shamanic counseling actually is quite good for that, to return with a drumming track, to go back and intentionally go back to the dream, or even to the psychedelic journey. So as well, with my CBT hat on, I'll say, it is also a good time where there is a neuroplastic window going on. So I would call that, it's like positive thought time. The things that you're telling yourself, affirmations, even the mantras from the journey, can be really helpful to just repeat. Try to repeat some of that positivity. Trying to reframe or dismantle or dismiss old, again in CBT language, negative automatic thoughts, working on those beliefs. If you've had a belief for your whole life since you were a child that you're not enough, that you're not good enough, that you weren't wanted, that you're not lovable, and through this experience you encounter the opposite of that, and it releases the ripple of changing of that experience, correcting that belief, and also then correcting the way you think about yourself in probably everyday situations is huge. So it's a really good opportunity to sit down and think about, well, what has this taught me about myself? What has it changed in how I think about myself and see myself? Those, even though you might have habits of thinking negatively about yourself, those thoughts probably won't carry the same bite, and maybe they're easier to dismiss, whereas before they seemed completely true and completely believable. So that is huge. At a cognitive level, that can make a massive difference. So other theories and things you can work with is IFS, or internal family systems, COEX systems. That's Stan Grof's theory about the kind of the events in their life with an energetic charge repeating themselves. Some people go all the way back and they see a difficult situation they had as a child and how it impacts them now. Maybe it dispels that. It allows us to be more kind to ourselves, not get so caught up. And then IFS is, working maybe with our inner child, with protectors and exiles and parts of ourselves that have split off, which psychedelic work can make it a lot easier to understand ourselves in that way, which is a more gentle way. Cognitively, there may be a piece for kind of placing some of the unexplainable in this. Again, that ontological shock, revisiting some of the sort of masters in those areas. I'll share a few books that may be helpful at the end for that. Things like, just after gratitude journaling, vision boarding, writing to your future self or about your future self can be really powerful at this time. It's like a good time to get that picture and that clarity, something that you're moving towards, a vision or image in your mind. Something that can also be helpful is exploring value changes. Many people report that just what used to make them tick, maybe it was a motivation for money, or it was a motivation for approval, or pleasing others, not feeling enough, that those were kind of like almost fear-based values, and that many people report actually are correcting that they move towards more, maybe it's more altruistic or self-compassionate or family-based values. So, ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, can have a lot of resources for that, for working out, okay, how has this actually changed what I value, what I think is important, basically for my life, and affecting those positive changes. Even changing things like beliefs like I have the right to change my mind, I have the right to be happy, I don't have to please other people. So, there's a lot that can go on at a cognitive level in terms of changes going on in the brain and how we think. And sort of psychotherapy integration, maybe support groups is maybe helpful as well in just trashing this out and speaking it out and understanding some of the cognitive changes, cementing them, you know. But then, of course, so we change all these ways that we think, but how does that ripple out? So in a physical sense, of course, psychedelics have a physical and energetic component. Very common to see people purging, releasing, vomiting, yawning, burping, hiccuping, stretching, and sort of, how we inhabit and rest in our physical bodies is huge in terms of moving towards health, wholeness. The stress causes disease, in our bodies, and having it literally being up to here with stress, it's very hard for us to think positively or critically about ourselves or about situations. So psychedelics, as well as working on the mind, are also helping to clear things in the body. And that's something that we can then continue to work with to ensure maximum benefits. So again, generally, hygiene, that should say rest, not fest. But yeah, festivals can also be great, but resting is key. Food, exercise, that's pretty generic. One thing I'd think about with psychedelics is trying to look at how does it maybe change your relationship to your body. Many of us walk around as if our body is just a kind of a vehicle for our brain to be carted around. We're maybe not super aware of how it feels or its sensations. We don't notice when we're holding stuff in our body. But this process, particularly I notice with psilocybin, can really sort of reorientate us to be a little bit less head identified, and everything going on up here is what's going on. That's where the focus is, to noticing more what's our body trying to tell us, how are we feeling, what's our energy levels like, how to kind of be kind to this vehicle that is our, I suppose, for this lifetime. It is our home, it is our representation, it houses us for as long as we're here. So this kind of new relationship with the body and sensitivity to what it needs can be a really important kind of embodiment piece for people. So I said, with that, it's very important to be in tune and manage ongoing stress. I put down drumming there. Drumming could be a nice way to release stress, or taking journeys into your body. Things like just embodiment, just acting as if, tuning into your body, feeling it, being really present. You're not up here in your head a million miles away, you're actually present. And then complementary therapies like aromatherapy, which you could even do in your own house with diffusers, sound baths, things that are sensual, dancing, laughing, yoga, tai chi, sort of polyvagal exercises, nervous system work, things like breathing techniques as part of your daily practice, techniques like bilateral tapping or stimulation, just all the things that you can do to bring yourself more fully into your body. And I think psychedelics can help us to prioritize that and to realize the value of that. Another piece is, to explore our healthy sexual needs. There could be a lot of shame and a lot of kind of guilt around things like that, but that sort of rediscovery of a healthy sense of sexuality is really, really important. Can also be part of your integration. Things like sauna, cold water, and things like, anchoring feelings, meditations you can do to return to the feelings you got in certain journeys. Just that sort of heart-centered, maybe feeling into yourself kind of work. So there's a lot of physical things that you can do. And, the more the better, really, in a sense, because you can't separate mind from body. And a healthier, more alive, more cared for body will definitely help you pursue any other goals you've had from your psychedelic integration. So moving through, on the emotional side. So through psychedelics, it's very common. We have emotional releases. We may have insights into where emotions are coming from. and indeed maybe a more compassionate view of our emotions, what they've been trying to tell us. It's very common to be conditioned, big boys don't cry, little girls don't get angry, all this kind of stuff that we're really trained how to cut ourselves off from our emotions, which cause a lot of problems. So it's very common for frozen emotions to keep coming afterwards. And we may need to make a little bit of room to keep processing. I've had people say, oh my God, I feel so angry. I've been angry for a week, but I'm actually enjoying it. I'm actually letting it out, or the need to let that grief out. I've kind of, the capstone, keeping it all down, has kind of been busted by the journey. And there may be a process where it's not fully evacuated yet, and you need to be gentle and encouraging and supportive to yourself to keep that going. So yeah, there may be a kind of a more compassionate approach to emotions. Compassion-focused therapy is very nice for this, creating a little time for your emotions. So maybe expressing leftover emotions, letting out sadness, anger, as well as, and again, some people it may be tough for some people, but also making room for joy, laughter, pleasure. They sort of say, well, when you kind of try and numb one set of emotions, you can't just numb one kind of emotion. You numb it all. So if you try to numb your sadness and numb your pain, you may also numb your joy, your laughter, your pleasure. And maybe it's a little bit where they say, the opposite of depression is expression. So even during a journey, I'd say, feel the emotions as intently as you can. Allow yourself, even if it feels endless and pointless, to just allow yourself, be here now, feeling. That's what emotions want. They just want to be felt. They just want to, they have a purpose. They just want to be felt. And if you do that and allow them to be there, they will move through. So again, sort of practicing inner child and parts work, say actively building self-esteem and self-acceptance of whatever emotion you're feeling, these sensations, again, like a new relationship to your body, new relationship to your emotions, that you allow them. And even if you're in a place where you can't just let all your emotions flow, later on, you give them some room. Breath work, again, can be a really positive piece around this, can really help you to access and allow emotions. Complementary methodologies, anything that helps you get into those emotions is really great, because a healthy flow of emotions and a healthy nervous system, a body that's unburdened, and a healthy mind, these three, they're all starting to come together. We'd say, re-listen to the music from the journeys, dance, and a big one as part of what we do at Inwardbound, there's normally an element of vocal work, singing, and can't actually see that last word, but sort of creativity that you're finding some way to express the emotions. So moving on to we're halfway there, moving on to this other dimension, which again I say, it's not it can be a loaded term, so it's not about forcing anybody into that box, but it's just saying, well, look, if we take a more nuanced a view of spirituality, is there something spiritual going on? And if there's not, that's fine. So I like this little image here, when something, it kind of reminds me of the spiritual insight, which can be terrifying, but also liberating, where there's one person on one side kind of saying, oh, well, that's it, nothing matters. But then on the other side, you have someone else kind of going, nothing matters, everything is okay. That's in some ways the healthy, or can be a relieving kind of experience of spirituality, where you kind of realize almost, or if you ever think about yourself in your place in the universe, sometimes I go on Wikipedia, look at the universe and the different galaxy clusters and the size of the Milky Way, to just get a little bit of perspective on, wow, really what size kind of we are. And the spiritual dimension, it may be something that people seek, or like it was actually in my case, maybe something they discover. So for me, it was actually more than I bargained for in this journey, and it can mean many things to many people. So you take from it what you need and what you're comfortable with, and you go from there. But a lot of the main research out there, like such as Griffiths, who sadly actually passed away last year, they would sort of look at a key sort of correlation between the best outcomes with psychedelic therapy and what happens is that people would rate highly on what they would call a mystical experience. This kind of spiritual or peak experience often gives people some of the best outcomes. So things you can do if you have had something like that, or you're looking to foster it very gently, maybe just more time in nature. Sometimes the rituals, meditation, shamanic practices. For me, shamanic practitioner training was great to deepen that sense. Something that can often help is reading up on it. Some of these people like Ramdas or other teachers may be speaking suddenly. If you've had an experience, suddenly their language, which was a bit hard to grapple with, might suddenly start to make a little more sense. So being open-minded to that, keeping that sort of ineffable alive in yourself. So that might be just remembering to pause and look and enjoy a sunset, look and enjoy a scene, just trying to tap back into that sense of like, oh, wow, something of beauty, of maybe something in nature, or seeing a baby, or something like that. Just trying to keep that alive and keep that maybe appreciation going. Again, keeping an altar, totems, mandalas in the home. You might have some kind of totem that you want to keep as a keepsake from it. And I suppose I'd always sort of say, some people, they say, oh, well, wow, I have this like sense of wonder and spirituality, or whatever that means to them. I have this sense. What if I lose it? Or one thing we always say is that, these things, they do get kind of imprinted in us or remembered, perhaps more than given to you, like, oh, you're special, you've been given this sight. That, normally life clouds over this kind of more in touch or plugged in kind of way of being. But that you can't really lose it because you've already had it, or you've always had it. So when life gets you down, and it sure will, and it's possible to feel much more spiritually well and connected, and with a sense of meaning and a sense of that kind of, well, maybe it's oneness is a word that would suit for you, or maybe it's whatever that means to you, or connected with nature, or able to breathe. That while life may cloud that over, but you can always get it back. And psychedelics are only one way. They show us that, but other practices, may also be a benefit. So this is where things like, again, the rituals, meditation, shamanic practices, or even just taking little moments in the day can really, really help to get that perspective. So then, I suppose if we've had maybe the first four, we've had cognitive realizations and changes, we've had physical release, a newfound appreciation for our body, we're more in touch with ourselves, in touch with what we need, emotionally, maybe unburdened, feeling more in touch there. And maybe spiritually, we've had some kind of like a bigger picture piece, or not, it's fine. What's probably going to happen then is that it's going to probably outwardly affect our behavior. So when things have moved, we're ready to behave maybe differently. And when we sort of start to act a little bit differently, or change the way we act, or increase good habits, that will in turn cement other positive changes. So we may pick up new inner and outer habits. We may be ready to start to grow out of our comfort zone, try new things. Those things that maybe we used to avoid doing, we maybe can start to move towards. We may pick up new spiritual habits. It may be eventually beginning to take action to say, well, actually, I want to change this in my life. And so being ready to make that change. We may be ready to start reducing avoidance. And, overall, a kind of a self-care and a new drive is probably going to equal some kind of outward action. So putting things into practice and moving forward. And then the sixth area is very much in the area of the social element. So a lot of models will just take like, oh, it's just all about the person. But of course, people are part of their context and part of their community. and that's where they can also have opportunities to grow or feel stifled. So I would say no one is an island. And although we go through our journeys, we then also return to our social environments, the lives that we have and mingle in our circles. So this area provides plenty of opportunities to cement and try out our growth, but also challenges may arise. And we see it quite a lot that people go back and they feel like, oh, well, I've changed, but nobody else has. So they have to start to make maybe hard choices, which, you know, they can be supported through making, but it can really test, say, if it's a newfound sense of self-esteem or something that they feel they've released, you know, it can really kind of test that this coming home phase can be tough. So I'd say, you know, first, practicing kindness and forgiveness is an important piece in all of this, you know, maybe trying to let some things go, and that includes for yourself and for others for things that have come before. So trying to move that, and remember, not everyone has had this psychedelic experience that you've just had. We'd say, you know, finding a community can be a really big important piece of this. So it doesn't mean necessarily ripping up the playbook and changing friends, but finding a little bit of a community, psychedelic societies, groups, like-minded people to connect with. Even the people who've been on your retreat, you know, keeping in touch with them can be really, really beneficial for you, just to avoid that kind of feeling of ontological, social loneliness that, you know, you're the only one in the world who can share this. And actually, for me, I used to compare it a little bit to when I had all these profound changes. It was like coming home, I felt like I have a new relationship, but it's secret. I can't tell anyone about it, but I'm ridiculously happy about it. But if I were to tell other people, they wouldn't get it. So, like, you know, so that was quite hard, and I'm sure many people feel the same. So finding a community can really, really help, to, even if it's like one or two people who have it in them to listen to you as you talk about that stuff, is really helpful. So I'd say, you know, group activities, doing things to be of service. A big one that comes in is socially. It's all about, you know, we can be super different with ourselves, but then the real litmus test is with other people. Like, actually, Ramdas said, you know, you think you're enlightened, go home for a week and spend time with your family. So things like asserting boundaries, putting in, saying no, things like that can be huge. It's a great opportunity for growth. Or reaching out for help. Many people even come to us, are in the helping professions, not so used to reaching out for help. They're maybe the eldest in the family, or they've always done things where they're the one that people go to for help, but actually reaching out for help is hugely growthful and beneficial. And we sort of say, yeah, some relationships may change, others may be enhanced. Don't fear, you know, losing friendships or people if you can. Even, you know, putting in a new set of boundaries, you give other people time to react, to get used to the new you, and it is often the people who care about you will, they will stick around, they will hold on. So moving into the last and final piece before we begin to wrap up. So the final area, if you've got your 6 already there and you're thinking, God, right, there's something going on with me in all of them, the final area is what we call the temporal. So it permeates all the others, and it's kind of that dimension of time. So first piece is attending to your short-term needs post-experience, but the second is time perduring, moving forward, and we can kind of expect ourselves, you know, right, I do this psychedelic thing, and then my progress in my life is just linear. I'm just like going from strength to strength to strength to strength, and I do this, I take this thing, and then I do these steps, this integration, and then that's me good, right? Well, could be, but also it's not always that straightforward. So I always say some journeys are being integrated for a lifetime. So you have to remember that sometimes we're a little bit off point with it, and then we come back to it. It comes back in again, or there's timely little reminders. Integration is not always a straight line of progress. Sometimes after the initial expansion, there can be a contraction. I had lots of clients who they leave on an absolute high. They go home, the first thing they do is they have a huge row with their significant other, or they have a big blowout with the whole family, with their kids and everything involved. So, and come back feeling, God, what's going on? So it's not always a straight line. It's not always a guarantee, but even the bumps in the road ahead can all be part of the journey. So again, a bit like socially, patience is needed with ourselves and others. Who here, would maybe suffer from lack of patience with themselves? Probably me, probably most people on the call. So we do need that little bit of patience with ourselves to give it time. Energetically, things are still shifting. Emotionally, cognitively, we're still processing these things way into the future. And yeah, kind of those psychedelics might bring us to a certain place. We do need that maybe a little bit of work to progress. And I like to say it's a paradox. At one level you may never be the same, but time and outside life may sometimes bring us 2 steps forwards and 1 step back at time. So time-wise, you're in a constant engagement with it, this piece, this experience, which can be, ultimately in a good way, earth-shattering or personality shifting. Ultimately, releasing and such a positive thing. We're constantly engaging with it, and sometimes it's we can feel it there more than others. In the spiritual side as well, a load of stress and a load of bad luck and things happening, you may feel completely out of touch with that. But having had the experience, it's like, how do I reorientate myself to get back? So, and many deep psychedelic experiences are always being integrated and expressed for the rest of our lives. So guys, I suppose coming back to the model, my recommendation for you guys would be maybe to take an inventory, a pre, post, and regular going forward of like coming into this, okay, how is my mind? What am I believing and thinking? How much negative thoughts do I have? How much do I trust the world? Physically, how am I getting on? Emotionally, spiritually, if I even touch that box at first, behaviorally, socially, temporally, you can maybe leave that to one side at the start. Or maybe you can write down, well, I want a quick fix right now, and I know that. Afterwards, where are you at in those 7 areas? 3 months later, 6 months later, you can sort of begin to work through or indeed work with a therapist or a coach or someone who's going to maybe help you with that, and it's part of the integration process on a retreat. So guys, that's kind of us for our model. As I promised, there are going to be some resources coming up now. So resources, the social resources, most towns and places, they do have their local psychedelic society. So there we've got the Psychedelic Society UK, Society of America, Psychedelic Society of Ireland, but every I think country and many major cities will have their own version of that, where you can meet people, maybe go to integration groups. The middle panels are that's a little bit of a demonstration of a cacao ceremony. And Shamanism Ireland is a place where I did a lot of my training. I met a lot of great folks there that would kind of get it, and you could talk about these different kind of experiences. So look up what's going on near you, and yeah, give yourself that space and time. It may be sound healing, it may be yoga, there may be studios where things are going on, there might be groups going for sea swims. If you are integrating, I think it's really key that you have some people, even one psychedelic buddy or an online group that you drop into like once every 6 weeks, just to keep it alive for yourself and to keep it going. And then the Psychedelic or Institute of Psychedelic Therapy in the UK and MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies in the US, provide lists of therapists or coaches that help people with the integration of psychedelics. Furthermore, some resources, books, websites. Some of these have helped me an awful lot. The middle one, I love the title, for nothing else, but it is brilliant. After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. How to get back into, how to get back from, in his case, it was around meditation retreats, but it can apply to returning back from a psychedelic experience or an intense experience, getting back into your everyday life, and what's that like? What do you do after? So you've reached it, now what? Eastern Body, Western Mind, brilliant book about the energy body, the chakra systems, the physical body, mixed with Western psychology. Classic How to Change Your Mind, Michael Pollan. He has written a great book there as kind of an introduction to the whole science of the whole area. Psychedelic Integration, Mark B. Axala. It's a big book, but it's really worth it. Awareness, Anthony DeMello, his audio tapes and books have helped me personally an awful lot, but I think without saying that that's for everybody, you know, I think everybody can explore and find things within their own tradition if it kind of makes sense. Arrowwood's website, MAP's website, Inwardbound has a good bit of FAQs, Hefter Institute, John Hopkins, Imperial College London, then the Tim Ferriss podcast, the Huberman podcast, and indeed the Psychedelics Today podcast have a lot of great resources there for folks you can go through. Not all those podcasts will, except for the Psychedelics Today, not all of them will have information on psychedelics, but if you go through the list, I'm sure you'll find quite a lot. And finally, just a few good movies if you want to start off light. Things like Fantastic Fungi, How to Change Your Mind, the series, The Wisdom of Trauma with Gabor Mate, Dosed, are all great ones, and I think Have a Good Trip is probably a little bit, is maybe a little bit lighter in nature, but still really good. So just to say thank you so much for watching this video or for joining us live tonight. Just to say these flowers are for you. And thank you so much. Inwardbound's applications are now open for 2024 retreats, psilocybin retreats in Costa Rica and the Netherlands. They're also running a training program for practitioners who would like to know more. It's an introduction program. Our website there is www.inwardbound.nl. And if anybody would like to reach out to me personally or connect, you can get me at mick@inwardbound.ie. That's amazing. So look, thank you so much for everything and wishing you all the best. Cheers.